My psycho ex-boyfriend just escaped prison, and now he wants revenge. I've always had a weak heart, not just physically. I've always been afraid of my own shadow. It was unsurprising when the doctors told me my heart murmur wasn't just a heart murmur. A year of tests, a year of therapy, constant trips to the hospital, and I was finally told that it had all been for nothing. My poor weak heart wouldn't last till Christmas. It's a strange thing being told that you're dying. I didn't come to terms with it at first. I drank and I spent my money. I did reckless, stupid things because I was so damn scared. Then I got the news that a young woman called Laura had been declared brain dead, and that I, the lucky chosen one, would be getting a brand new heart a week later. I drove to the hospital slowly, carefully, and readied myself for the ordeal that was to come. As I was laying in bed last night, the thought of Laura swirled around in my head, and it wouldn't leave me alone. It was like her name was in flashing lights every time I closed my eyes. It was wrong, I know it was, but I had to see the woman who was giving me her heart. It didn't feel right not to put a face to the one who was saving my life. I knew her name. I knew what ward she was staying on. I had overheard the two nurses discussing it. I wandered down the meandering hallways until I found what I was looking for, taking my time, making sure I didn't miss any names. I guess I had time on my hands now. In the second to last room, she lay in bed. A woman sat on the bed next to her, holding her hand, and my own weak heart stuttered. "Excuse me." I had no idea what to say to her. "I'm Jenna. I'm the person that's having the heart surgery tomorrow." What I assumed was Laura's mother stood up, and I could tell from the look in her eye that she knew who I was. "Thank you for visiting. I know it's strange, but a part of her is going to be living on in you. I wanted to meet you." I stood there, helpless and lost for words. Laura's mother beckoned me over. "Please," she said, "don't feel uncomfortable. It's what she would have wanted." I sat on the chair next to Laura. "How did she?" I cut myself off. It was too awful to ask. Laura's mother gave me a thin smile. She was a care worker, looked after battered wives, abused women. Last month she met a guy and, well, I suppose years of training can't help you when you're in love. She ignored the warning signs, and he murdered her. She dedicated her life to those who needed her. Laura's mother looked down. I don't know why I did it, but I reached over and held Laura's hand. I squeezed it. "I'm so sorry. I had a boyfriend once he was like that too. Someone like Laura convinced me to leave." Laura's mother gave me another half smile. I could see the tears in her eyes. Then Laura squeezed my hand, tightly. She gripped me so hard that her fingernails dug into my skin. I recoiled, a look of horror on my face. Laura's mother looked at me calmly. "She squeezes my hand sometimes as well. I think the doctors called it muscle spasms. Either way, there's none of Laura left in there anymore." I looked at the small crescent moons that had just started to bleed on the palm of my hand. The surgery went perfectly. I was wheeled to the recovery suite after it was over and done with, the raised wound on my chest covered by gauze. It was better if I didn't see it, I thought. I didn't need any more heart issues. I spent the first day doped up on the pain medication, eating only a little and sitting up maybe 2 times. It was a long process, they reassured me. Laura's mother came to visit me the day before I was supposed to leave. Her calm demeanor hadn't wavered, but I could see that she was suffering. She looked 10 years older, and her hands shook when she gave me a hug. "When are you going home?" "Tomorrow," I told her. "Please come visit whenever you want." I started to jot down my address for her, when out of the corner of my eye, a flash of blonde disappeared through the doorway. The same brilliant blonde as Laura's hair. "Ow!" I cried out suddenly. It felt like someone had sharply squeezed my hand so hard, it had almost crushed the bones. Laura's mother rushed to my side, a look of concern in her eyes. "What's wrong? Is it your heart?" She stumbled over the last words, coming to terms with what she had said. I tried to reassure her and said I'd let the doctors know, and she left with a look of worry on her face. When I looked down, a new set of crescent fingernail marks were below the ones that Laura's had made. 10 identical bleeding smiles. The taxi ride home was short, and before I knew it, I was back in my own flat. It felt strange to try and slot back into where I had left off. My life had been almost over the last time I had been here. I looked over the mess in the cardboard boxes, the remnants of one night where I had tearfully tried to pack and store my belongings so my parents wouldn't have to do it when I died. Laura's heart beat so strongly it felt like it would come out of my chest. It did this all the time, and I realized this was what a healthy heart must feel like. So why couldn't I shake my feeling of unease? That night, I had a dream. Laura was in her hospital bed, but her mother was gone. I could hear my heart, Laura's heart, beating in my eardrums so loudly it was painful. I tried to cover them, but my hands were pinned to my sides. Some unexplainable force was moving me towards the motionless figure of Laura on the bed. Her lips were blue and the window had come open, whipping her blonde hair around her face. I was almost on top of her when her eyes flew open. They were milky white, the eyes of someone dead. "Get out," she rasped, her voice guttural. I could hear the heartbeat faster and faster, drumming until I thought I couldn't take it anymore. Then I woke up. The sound had been real. Laura's heart was so loud it felt like it would rupture my eardrums, and I screamed in agony, trying to cover my ears. It was useless. It was coming from some deep place inside me. I could feel it reverberating around the hollows of my chest. I stumbled out of bed, gasping for air, and tried to find my phone. I needed to call someone, anyone, an ambulance, or my mom. Anyone that would pick up. Get out. It was a faint whisper over the hammering thumps of Laura's heart. A low guttural voice that sounded like it had been made by an animal, and I crawled to the door, down the hallway, choking on my screams for help. My neighbor opened the door, his eyes as wide as saucers at the sight of me on the floor clutching my chest. He drove me to hospital as I cried in the passenger seat of his car. After about 50 different checkups, the doctors told me that absolutely nothing was wrong with me. They told me my heart was stable, my blood pressure was normal, and that everything was going perfectly. I stood in the waiting area, wallowing in my shame and frustration. That heart didn't belong to me. My phone buzzed on the counter, an unknown number. Great. That was all I needed, more unexplained scary things like a stranger on the end of the phone. My voice sounded petite on the line. Hello? Good morning, this is the Thames Valley Police. We've called to report an incident that occurred in your flat at around 1:30 a.m. today. I felt a wave of embarrassment wash over me. I'm so sorry. I recently had surgery and I wasn't feeling well. I had to have my neighbor drive me to the hospital and I think I panicked a little in the hallway before I left. There was a small silence on the other end of the phone. I'm afraid this is something you might want to be sitting down for. I felt Laura's heartbeat, strong and calm. There was an incident of forced entry by Mr. Samuel Matthews. According to our police records, he's your ex-partner, and you filed a restraining order against him in September 2017. My blood ran cold. I did. He's in police custody. We found an automatic weapon on him, and we believe he had the intent to harm you. We have an officer currently stationed at your flat who can fill you in depending on how long your hospital stay will be. I thanked him and hung up the phone. For a moment, I leant against the wall, the horror slowly spreading over me. If I had been in my flat 10 minutes later, he would have found me. Laura's heartbeats filled my ears again, but now they were gentle, calming. Her mother said she dedicated every part of her to helping those who needed it. I put both my hands on my chest, overwhelmed by my own gratitude, and listened to Laura. I ignored a no-soliciting sign. It was the biggest mistake of my life. Amid icy breath, a golf ball in hand, I stumbled upon a doorstep riddle. A choice between life and death, wrapped in a chilling smile. My breath curled like tendrils of frost from my mouth into the frigid air, and I reached into the depths of my coat pocket, retrieving the dimpled golf ball. The dim glow of the porch light cast eerie shadows on the sign next to the door, its bold font typical of such notices. No soliciting. Beneath it, in a smaller font, seriously, don't ring the bell, don't make it weird. A knowing grin tugged at the corners of my lips. With a practiced hand, I tapped on the door using the golf ball, a trick I'd picked up to spare my knuckles from winter's bite. Chuckling softly, I slipped the ball back into my pocket. Kudos to the homeowner for creativity, but I was on a mission to make things weird. Climbing the corporate ladder meant embracing the unconventional after all. The door swung open, revealing a regular-looking guy, nondescript yet amiable. Hey there, are you the homeowner? I began, my tone carefully calibrated. My first week on the job had taught me that sounding like a stereotypical salesperson was a surefire way to be ignored. My goal was to be someone else entirely, a blue-collar worker perhaps, a low-ranking grunt from the electric company, someone untrained in the delicate art of customer interaction, burdened by important tasks that concerned the safety of their home and their ability to keep the lights on, yet impatient to escape. Someone who would gladly exit, if only they'd sign the darn form and let them be. The man gave me an appraising look. Yes, what's this about? Apologies, sir, I smoothly continued. I just need to make you aware of a new program coming through Great Lakes Power. It's slated to roll out in the next couple of weeks, and we're going around informing folks so they're up to speed on how it might impact their power bills. I see, he responded, his face a mask. Well, I appreciate the heads up. I thought you might be a solicitor at first, which would have been an issue given... His voice trailed off and he gestured toward the sign. But if you're here from Great Lakes Power, then you'd better come in. Technically, I hadn't claimed to be from Great Lakes Power. I'd merely indicated that the new program was associated with them, which was true, considering they were the sole power company in the vicinity. But who was I to argue when an invitation was extended? Stepping inside, I settled onto the couch in his living room, while he took an armchair opposite me. So, he began, leaning forward slightly. Let's talk about my power bill. I cleared my throat, adopting an air of detachment. Right. On an average month, what would you say you typically pay? It varies, he replied, his voice tinged with the reminiscence of summertime. During the warmer months, it can climb pretty high, around $175 on average. Okay, I said, masking my inner satisfaction. A pang of dopamine tickled my senses, a familiar thrill that accompanied the ease of sealing a deal. Well, here's some good news. This program we're introducing should actually save you money. Notice the deliberate shift. Not would, but should. Not, if you choose to participate, but because you will participate. A sigh of relief escaped the man, followed by a genuine smile. Oh, that's a relief. Finances have been a bit tight lately. More mouths to feed than usual, you know? Absolutely, I replied, feigning empathy while my mind raced with thoughts of clinching the deal with our prized solar panel sales pitch. Ironically, my ears scarcely registered his words, so absorbed was I in my own scripted responses. His polite nod indicated his satisfaction. Well, thank you for sharing this information. When can I anticipate a decrease in my bill? The crucial transition, guiding the unsuspecting prospect towards setting a sales appointment, all without them realizing they're being led down that path. We're looking at about 2 months, I responded smoothly, masking the fact that the ball was firmly in their court. Maybe even sooner. We just need one of our team members to swing by later this week, assess your wiring, verify your eligibility, and get everything squared away. What timing works best for you? Eligibility? He echoed, his smile unwavering. A sense of unease began to gnaw at me, amplifying the growing aversion to his seemingly innocuous grin. Something about it seemed contrived, suggesting he was less gullible than he appeared. Indeed, I stammered, not out of confusion but because his smile, despite its charm, began to exude an unsettling aura. Gazing into his eyes for the first time, I found them devoid of life, devoid of humanity. A sudden urge to flee churned within me, to escape, to return home, to embrace the warmth of my mother's embrace. A slight cough signaled his interruption. Considering people usually inquire about my eligibility for reasons related to my credit score, he mused, the smile becoming knowing. And often the ones interested in my credit score happen to be solicitors, and you, my friend, have already been proven to not be a solicitor. My mouth was parched, my instincts screaming for an exit strategy. No, I'm not attempting to sell you anything, sir. He chuckled softly, his smile morphing into a sinister grin that clashed with the jovial timbre of his laughter. Of course not. However, it's possible that you're employing a clever wordplay to maneuver me into an appointment with someone who will. Well, you see, I began, my voice faltering. It is a solar-focused initiative, sir. Curious, he interjected, his smile finally vanishing. I wasn't aware Great Lakes Power was involved in solar panel distribution. My lips moved wordlessly, as if engaged in a battle with an unyielding force, a force that embodied the lifelessness of a corpse. Unless, of course, you're not affiliated with Great Lakes Power at all, he continued, his smile absent now, which would imply that you've misled me. I mean, technically I never explicitly stated my affiliation. No, you imply the program was conducted through Great Lakes Power. Quite the shrewd manipulation, one might say, intentionally misleading even. My resolve solidified, an intense urgency to flee overtaking my being. Rising to my feet, my mind screaming escape, he swiftly produced a matte black handgun, fitted with a silencer. I suggest you remain seated, he remarked, the grin returning with unnerving calm. Sinking back into the couch, I offered no resistance. Here's a twist of wordplay, he mused. I remember instructing you to enter if you were from the power company. By extension, since you're not a representative of the power company, that renders your entry unlawful. You've broken the law, my friend. You're a criminal. Do you comprehend my feelings toward criminals? My head shook wordlessly. Interestingly enough, I have a fondness for them, he revealed. People like you and me, those who ardently pursue their desires and when the opportunity arises, seize them, disregarding the constraints of the law. I admire that trait. So I'll overlook your inadvertent defilement of my couch and grant you clemency. He rose from his seat, the firearm still in hand. However, before you leave, there's a small favor I need, he continued. Do you see the tray over there on the table? His gaze drifted towards a tray bearing 3 bowls, each filled with what appeared to be oatmeal. Yes, I managed, my voice a mere whisper. I was just about to deliver that to my guests when you so flagrantly overlooked my no soliciting sign. Would you be so kind as to convey it to them on my behalf? Fearful of defying him, I hesitated only briefly before complying. Moments later, I found myself traversing a doorway leading down a dim, damp staircase. A shiver rippled through me as the icy air gnawed at my skin, tracing the path of a chilling wetness that ran down my leg. Upon reaching the basement, a gasp escaped my lips, and the tray slipped from my grasp, its contents spilling across the cold concrete floor. My surroundings came into stark focus. A small, grimy room housing 3 emaciated figures, shackled to grimy mattresses. One was missing multiple fingers, another an entire hand. Their countenance radiated not just despair, but a profound, enduring hopelessness. The stench of misery hung heavy in the air. I apologize, gentlemen, the man chimed in, following me down the stairs. It seems our new solar sales associate has had a bit of an accident. A regrettable occurrence, as I'm sure you were eagerly anticipating your first meal in 2 days. Overwhelmed, my eyes welled up with tears. Look at him. The man addressed his captives, his tone laced with mockery. He's the one who ruined your meal, yet he's the one shedding tears. Quite the audacious salesman, isn't he? The atmosphere, once filled with levity, now took on a twisted, macabre quality. His demeanor retained its facade of mirth, but I detected a nuance, a hint that his enjoyment was merely a ruse. Perhaps one of you should teach our friend a lesson, he mused, savoring the anticipation. I do have a penchant for tales of retribution. With those words, he produced another handgun from his pocket, tossing it casually within reach of his shackled captives. One condition, he elucidated, his tone deceptively light. Aim it at me and I end your existence. Yet for the one among you brave enough to end our solar salesman's life, I'll grant you immediate freedom. The captives exchanged furtive glances, torn between the promise of liberation and the dread of taking another life. No, Please. The plea escaped me before I recognized it as my own voice. One of the prisoners, his voice croaking, declared their defiance. We won't. We refuse. A single tear traced a path down his grimy cheek, his gaze fixed on the tantalizing instrument of possible escape. All of you? The man inquired, genuine surprise dancing across his features. What a noble stance. Admirable indeed. Let's see how that fares. His grin dissolved, shifting into a contemplative expression. Slowly, he turned his attention to me, nodding toward the abandoned gun on the floor. How about this? He pondered aloud. You or them? I stared at him, uncomprehending. What? You or them, he repeated, the weight of his words settling like a shroud. Pick up that gun. Unalive these men and you walk free. Choose to end your own life, and these virtuous men can return to their families unharmed. The gravity of the situation pressed down upon me, the walls of the room seemingly closing in. His intentions were clear, each option etched with its own brand of horror. Decisions, he mused, his gaze fixed intently on me. Make your choice, and let fate unravel. The words hung heavy in the air, a sinister resonance echoing through the dimly lit basement. My mind whirled, trapped within the claustrophobic grip of his perverse ultimatum. The smothering silence was punctuated only by my ragged breaths and the distant haunting cries of the forsaken. As his unblinking gaze bore into my soul, a chilling revelation dawned upon me, a chilling certainty that the lifeless, calculating eyes that had met mine were the manifestation of an abyssal malevolence far beyond my comprehension. I sold my soul to a homeless man. It was the biggest mistake of my life. It started at the drive-thru on the way to work yesterday. My coffee was already paid for. The woman at the window gave me a huge, beaming smile and told me that the car right ahead had paid for my drink as a random act of kindness. There's no car in front of me, I told her, feeling almost stupid for saying it. Her smile faltered a little bit, and I could see her hands shaking as she adjusted her collar. The black car in front of you paid for it, she repeated. Her smile was forced. It didn't reach her eyes. I glanced in front of me. Nothing. Are you okay? I asked her, and her bottom lip trembled. Please just take the coffee, she hissed through her teeth, leaning in as if someone would overhear us. I grabbed the coffee. There was traffic on the way to work as always. I couldn't help but think about the woman at the drive-thru. I know this year has been hard for everyone, but she looked terrified, like a rabbit caught in headlights. I took a sip from the coffee and sighed. My boss has been difficult for the past few months. It was almost a relief to sit in traffic instead of being at work. James is the kind of boss who gets his kicks from making me feel like an idiot. His favorite trick is calling me up to the front during meetings for questions I don't know the answer to. Seeing his smug face staring up at me as I squirm makes me want to drive slower and slower into this dumb job every day. I wish he'd take a long walk off a short pier. That's when I saw the car, a black sedan behind me. That was odd. I could have sworn that it had been a red convertible 5 seconds ago. I cranked my neck to see the driver in the rearview mirror and caught a glimpse of a man in a dark suit. He was smiling, a wide grin to either side of his face. Damn! My phone rang, almost making me jump out of my seat. Hello? Laura! It was Gina, my boss's secretary. Her voice sounded harried, muffled, as if she had a cold. What's wrong, Gina? You sick? No, she whispered. It's James. They found him an hour ago. Laura, he's dead. Oh God. What? How? I heard Gina's quiet sniffing break down into sobs. The police said I can't. I'm just supposed to tell you to not come to work today. Gina stammered over her words, and I quickly told her it was fine. I'd turn around and head home. The man from the black car caught my eye as I turned into the next exit. It might have been my imagination, but his smile had gotten wider. This morning I woke up to a package on my doorstep, a little box, packaged neatly in my favorite color with a bow on the top. A black car was circling in the parking lot outside as I picked up the package and took it inside. I locked my door behind me. As I unwrapped it, the smell hit me immediately. It was like roadkill left outside. I had to cover my nose as I lifted the lid of the box. It was a head, James's head, with a gold ribbon and a note placed directly on top. I stumbled to the bathroom and threw up in the toilet. This couldn't be happening. I grabbed my phone, dialed 911 as quickly as I could. Hello? A voice answered and I breathlessly explained everything that I could. The gifts, the car, the note on top of the head. Open the note, the dispatch caller whispered. What? Please just do it. He'll know if you haven't. A dial tone clicked and he was gone. It took me 3 hours and half a bottle of whiskey to do it. I could hear the noise of a car driving around outside. It felt like I was losing my mind. Hello, Laura? The note began. Today, a man will ask you to flip a coin for him. Regardless of the outcome, you will tell him you flipped tails. I drank until I passed out. When I woke up, both the note and James's head had vanished, but the smell of rot was still seeping into the carpets. It took a few hours before he approached me. I was at the gas station buying another bottle to try and forget everything that had happened. Maybe it was a nervous breakdown. Maybe there had never been any package. Can I ask you a favor? He was quiet, with dark circles under his eyes. Can you flip a coin for me? I could feel my chest constricting, trying to hide the look of fear that I knew was on my face. Sure. My voice was shaking. I took out a coin, flipped it, peeked under my hand. Heads. Tails. I lied quickly. The man's face fell. Makes sense, he said and gave me a half-hearted smile. He left without buying anything. As I felt around in my pockets for the rest of the spare change, I felt paper on my fingertips. It was a note. How the hell did someone manage to put it in my pocket without me knowing? Had it been there the whole time? Thank you, Lara, for your random act of kindness. More instructions to follow. Was this just a really bad prank? Was the guy who'd asked me to flip the coin in on it too? I'd almost convinced myself until I left the store and saw the man from the gas station in his car. Something was glinting in his hand, catching the light. I squinted, trying to see. He pointed it upwards towards his chin. There was a loud explosion. I led a raid against the Taliban. I'm about to tell you the gruesome secrets they were hiding. I was a platoon leader for Alpha Company of the 82nd Airborne Division. In 2019, I was deployed to Afghanistan for military operations against the Taliban. It wasn't my first deployment, so I didn't think anything of it. Green, my company commander, Captain Forrester, called over. Yes, sir, I responded back. Meet me in my command tent ASAP, he responded. I didn't think a lot of this. I was either being called in for a briefing of a mission we had to do or for sending an enlisted man home, but this was different. I walked into the command tent and my battalion commander, Colonel Gordons, was there with Captain Forrester. Right. Forrester started with the briefing. There is a squad of Taliban soldiers in the town of Pakita. They are holding the line for the rest of the Taliban army so they can resupply on weapons, food, and other resources, Forrester said. Your assignment is to either murder or make those bums leave Pakita. You're going to assemble a 10-man squad to carry out this mission. Choose wisely on who you want to go, Gordon said. Will do, sir. I responded. You're dismissed. Trucks leave for Pakita in 10 minutes, Gordon said. I saluted Gordons and left the tent. I now had to make a quick list of who I wanted to go with me. I was already thinking of names. Diceman, Rutherford, Martinez, Sutri, Boyd, Wilkes, Johnston, Deck, Santana, and Coleman. Then I decided that was my team. These were my boys since boot camp. I trusted these guys with everything. I reported to the barracks where my platoon was at. I briefed the men on the mission and they understood. These men were experienced and knew what to do, so I didn't have to explain a lot. No questions were asked, so we were good to go. When we got on the trucks, I had this gut feeling that something wrong was going to happen, but I just brushed it off as nervousness. We got to the town and it looked destroyed. Most of the buildings in the town looked abandoned. Some of the buildings were missing windows and all the doors were missing. Some of the buildings were missing chunks of brick or whatever material they were built with. We were walking down the main road before we heard a scream coming from the building to the left of us. It was a horrific scream, something you would hear out of a horror movie when the murderer would be chasing the victim. The scream sounded like it came from a middle-aged man. What the hell was that? Martinez asked. It was a rhetorical question. For the first time, for some reason, I felt fear rushing through my body. I don't like the feeling of this, Deck said. Well, it's our job to investigate it. Everyone on me, I said. I didn't want to go into that building, but it was my job and I had to. When we went into that building, the inside looked awful. The walls were almost torn down. The furniture looked burnt and was also tossed around. There were also splatters of blood on some of the walls. Did we run into a Taliban crime scene? Boyd asked. No clue, I responded back. The building was a one-family home with a lot of bedrooms, so I had no choice but to split the squad up to search the building. All right, Diceman, Sutri, Coleman, Boyd, and Johnston. Search the left side of the house, everyone else with me, I said back. We split up when we went through the hallway. The hallway was dark and had no windows. There were pieces of debris and clothing on the ground. We saw a room to the right of us with the door wide open. I looked at Rutherford, who was behind me. He shook his head to inform me we were good to breach. We breached, and what we saw still haunts me to this day. The Taliban soldiers that were here were dead and in a pile. Almost all of them were missing limbs. It almost looked like they were all victims of a shark attack. A chill went up my spine. I was frozen in place, not knowing what to do. Who the hell did this? Santana asked. I was too scared to answer. Sir? Rutherford called over. Rutherford was standing next to the closet in the bedroom. I went over to Rutherford and saw what he was looking at. Written on the door in blood was a note. The note read the following. You are not welcome here. Leave now. I felt goosebumps start to rise. I was now thinking of getting the hell out of there. I radioed over to Diceman. Diceman, do you read? No response. Diceman, do you read over? No response. We have to search for Diceman and the rest of the squad, I said to everyone. They all shook their heads, implying they understood. We left the room, now in the dark hallway again. As we were walking, I noticed a dark figure standing at the end of the hallway, where us and Diceman split up. It was at least 8 feet tall and had glowing yellow eyes. U.S. Army, surrender immediately, I yelled to the figure, aiming my weapon at it. It didn't do anything except smile. You could see its white teeth and its long, fearing smile. It then disappeared. What the hell? I thought to myself. I looked at the rest of the squad behind me and they were just as scared as I was. We kept walking down the hallway until we saw another figure. This time it was around Diceman's height. Diceman, I yelled over. He looked back at me, but something was strange. He didn't say anything. That's not Diceman, Santana whispered. The figure started running towards us. Diceman, stop! I yelled. He didn't stop. I shot him twice in the leg. He fell over. He was practically right in front of me. What the hell are you? Rutherford yelled. Diceman looked at us. His eyes were in the back of his head and he was pale. We are the reason you guys have nightmares at night. We are the reason your children can't sleep at night alone. We are fear. I shot him in the head. He was dead. Me and the squad left the building in town. I reported what happened and was told to keep quiet about what happened. I don't know what happened to Boyd and the others, but what I experienced will live with me till the day I die. I thought I was experiencing sleep paralysis. That is, until I started to feel pain. The night the car hit me, I was walking home from the diner, my thoughts echoing with loneliness and the shattering glass of shattered dreams. I woke up in a hospital bed, wreathed in a silence so thick it felt like I was drowning. From that moment on, I started seeing things in my sleep. Dreams, but not any ordinary dreams. Visions of crimes that hadn't happened yet. And every time I woke up, I felt like I was surfacing from an abyssal trench, gasping for air in the bright white of hospital linens. Each dream was beyond traumatizing. The scenes played out in murky colors. The emotions ran high in shades of crimson and obsidian. Violent acts would unfold in a nauseating spectacle, and I was the unwilling witness. A woman with cascading raven black hair being chased in a dark alley, a convenience store clerk about to be robbed, a hit and run just around the corner from my home. Each vision was more vivid and terrifying than the last. At first I thought these nightmares were side effects of the medications they were pumping into my veins. But the dreams didn't stop when I was discharged. I took my fragmented sleep and my shattered sanity home, trying to piece myself back together in the echoing silence of my apartment. I told my therapist about the dreams. Her brows knitted in concern. She suggested they were a subconscious manifestation of my trauma, assuring me they would cease with time. But they didn't. They got worse. The crimes I saw began materializing in the real world. News headlines echoed my nightmares, word for word, scene for scene. First it was the woman from the alley, her photo flashing on the evening news. Local woman found dead in downtown alley, police suspect foul play. A week later it was the convenience store clerk, his store robbed, his life taken. I tried to warn people to prevent these crimes before they happened, but who would believe a trauma victim claiming he saw future crimes in his dreams? I was laughed out of the police station. My pleas for understanding met with smirking disbelief. My therapist suggested stronger medication. My friends began to distance themselves. I was alone, carrying a terrifying secret. One evening as I sat alone in my apartment, bathed in the sickly glow of the TV, I fell asleep. This time the dream was different. It was vivid, more real than any before. I saw a small boy with a shock of messy brown hair playing in a park under the watchful eyes of his mother. I could see her face clearly. Emily, my high school sweetheart. I watched in paralyzing fear as a man approached them. His face was obscured, but I could sense his menacing intent. The sound of my own horrified gasp jolted me awake. Sweat trickled down my forehead as I fumbled for my phone. The clock read 3:13 a.m., mocking me with its digital glare. Emily wouldn't believe me. She had not since we parted ways years ago, but I had to try. I dialed her number, my heart pounding in sync with each pulse of the dial tone. She answered on the third ring, her voice groggy and laced with annoyance. I told her about the dream, the man in the park, the danger looming over her and her son. The silence on the other end was worse than any verbal scorn. Then without a word, she ended the call. My heart sank, but there was nothing more I could do. As dawn broke, I prayed to whatever God would listen that this one dream at least would not come true. The days that followed were a lesson in hope and despair, alternating in such cruel intensity that I found it hard to breathe. I tried to convince myself it was just a dream, a delusion, but my faith in that lie faltered with each tick of the clock. I was a prisoner to time, to the horrible visions etched into my psyche, to the reality I had no power to change. One night, plagued by restlessness, I decided to visit the park from my dream. The crescent moon cast a gloomy glow over the deserted playground. I shivered, pulling my coat tighter, each rustle of the wind setting my nerves on edge. I approached the bench from my vision, each footstep feeling like a journey into the labyrinth of my worst fears. Suddenly my phone buzzed, a shrill disturbance in the tranquility of the night. I glanced at the caller ID. Emily. My blood ran cold. Has the nightmare come true? With trembling hands I answered, but instead of the anticipated hysteria, I was met with a shocked silence. Then Emily's voice, barely a whisper, drifted over the line. How did you know? The world around me started spinning. I clutched the phone tighter as I asked her what happened. She told me that a man had approached them in the park, just as I had said. But remembering my call, she had grabbed her son and fled before anything could happen. The police had later found the man, a known predator, lurking around the playground. My warning had saved them. The revelation hit me like a freight train, a brutal acknowledgement of my terrifying ability. I was seeing the future in my dreams, but now, with the right actions, I had the power to change it. For the next few weeks, I lived in a state of hypervigilance. I began jotting down every detail of my nightmares, every face, every location, every act of violence that was yet to be committed. I sent anonymous tips to the police, made frantic calls to potential victims, anything to prevent the nightmares from becoming reality. But with each night that passed, I was spiraling further into despair. My nights were a battlefield, my dreams the enemy. My waking hours were consumed by paranoia, each moment ticking away with the weight of impending doom. My health deteriorated, the gauntness of my face a stark reflection of the terror etched on my soul. I was losing myself, one nightmare at a time. But then, the dreams changed. One night, instead of a series of disconnected crimes, I saw one continuous narrative. It began with a deserted street, the buildings eerily similar to those in my neighborhood. A car pulled up, the driver hidden by the shadows. Out stepped a girl, her bright red hair a stark contrast against the gloom. I recognized her as my neighbor Lily, always cheerful and full of life. In the dream, she walked towards her building, unaware of the figure following her. Panic surged through me as I watched the scene unfold. I was once again the helpless observer, unable to alter the course of events. As the figure lunged at Lily, I woke up, my screams echoing in the silent room. In the harsh light of dawn, I found myself at a crossroads. My responsibility was clear. I had to warn Lily, but after Emily, could I convince someone again? Would Lily believe my crazy story? I had no choice. I couldn't just stand by and let another nightmare come true. Battling my self-doubt, I decided to approach Lily. She was surprised to see me at her doorstep, a living ghost from next door she barely knew. My tongue felt heavy as I tried to explain, my words sounding ridiculous to my own ears. But I pushed through, my determination fueled by the vivid image of her terror-stricken face from my dream. Her reaction was one I had expected yet feared. Disbelief painted over her features, her eyes narrowed with suspicion and perhaps a hint of fear. I couldn't blame her. How could she believe such an outrageous claim from a stranger? And yet, I pleaded with her, desperation making my voice quaver. But she politely shut the door on my face, leaving me alone with my failure. The next few days were agonizing. Each time I saw Lily leaving the house, a pang of dread stabbed my heart. The world felt out of focus. Time lost its meaning. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't breathe without the specter of the nightmare looming over me. Then one night it happened. Lily didn't come home. Her apartment remained dark, and fear knotted in my stomach. I rushed to the police, my frantic words forming a garbled plea for help. The police didn't believe me at first, attributing my terror to anxiety and stress. But the next morning, Lily was officially declared missing. The disbelief in the officers' eyes turned into shock, then a grim determination as they began their search. Days turned into a nightmarish blur. The entire neighborhood was in an uproar, and the police were searching every corner, every alley. The dreams had stopped, and for once I wished they would come back, give me a clue, a way to find Lily. But I was left in the dark, a spectator in my own life. Then one night, out of nowhere, a new vision flashed before my eyes. I was standing in an old warehouse, damp and dilapidated. There on the cold concrete floor lay Lily unconscious, her red hair spread around her like a halo. I woke up gasping, my heart pounding in my chest. This was it. This was where she was. With renewed vigor, I ran to the police station detailing my dream. The officers exchanged skeptical glances but decided to entertain my claim, desperate for any leads. They found the warehouse just as I had described, in an isolated part of town. Inside, they found Lily, unconscious but alive, just as I had seen. The relief that washed over me was indescribable. Lily was safe, and the predator was soon apprehended. But with that relief came a chilling realization. The dreams, the nightmares, they were a part of me. A terrible gift, a morbid legacy. From that day forward, I became a reluctant sentinel, a silent guardian. Each night I would descend into my own personal hell, watching horrors unfold before my eyes, horrors that were yet to come. But in the face of such terror, I found purpose. I was saving lives, altering destinies. It was a burden, yes, but one I was willing to bear. As the sun set, I knew the nightmares awaited, yet I welcomed sleep, ready to face the specters of the night. They were my demons, my saviors, my reality. And as I closed my eyes, I realized this was my life now. A life lived in the shadows of the future, forever poised on the edge of horror and hope. After all, we're all prisoners of our own minds, but only some of us have the key. Someone is impersonating my family. Today I finally confronted them. I'm a nurse and I'm currently working the graveyard shift. It's a total drag, but I'm hopeful I can leave 2 days earlier since some coworkers are already planning their retirements. Anyway, I was working one night when just after 3 a.m., my son's monitor alerted me to sound and movement. No big deal at all. He probably coughed loudly or sneezed or something. He's 3 now, so he generally sleeps all night. I bring it up on my phone, and I see him and my wife sitting on the bed. Again, no big deal. He might have cried out or gotten scared or something. I was about to close the app when I noticed they were acting strange, almost creepy. And when I say almost creepy, I mean creepy as balls. They were sitting on the bed together, both of them just staring up at the camera with blank, emotionless stares. The night vision is black and white, so they had white, eerie-looking eyes. They didn't move at all aside from their visible breathing. They just sat there staring at the camera. I closed the app and gave my wife a call to make sure everything is okay. I never got to call home for lunch, so in a way this was kind of nice to get to talk to my family while at work. It rang a couple times before she answered with a very groggy, "Hello?" It was like she was dead asleep when I called and she looked wide awake when on the camera. "Hey, you guys okay?" "Huh? Yeah. Buddy, my son's nickname, came in like 15 minutes ago. Seemed scared, so I said he could sleep with Mama." I was confused here since I saw them in his room a minute ago. Literally 60 seconds had passed since I closed the app and made the call. Wait, so you guys are in bed? Yeah, I fell back asleep right away. Everything okay? Everybody keeps waking me up. She's kind of annoyed. Hang on a sec. I put her on speaker and bring up the app, hoping I don't see it. When the app loads, I get that pang of intense nervousness in my stomach that I haven't had in a long time, since I was a kid in school and realized while I was eating breakfast a paper or something was due that day, and I hadn't done it. My heart leaps into my throat. My wife and son are sitting on his bed looking up at the camera, same emotionless stares. Hello? You guys are in bed, right? Yeah, we're trying to sleep. Well, I'm looking at his camera and I see you two sitting on his bed. Huh? No, we're in our bed. I know that's what you mean, but I'm looking at his bed and you two are in there. Hang on, she says. She's quiet for a sec while she brings up the camera on her phone. I hear this guttural, terrified gasp, like she had sucked all the air in the room into her lungs, filling them to capacity. I haven't heard anyone gasp this intensely. I heard some sheets rustling, then the line went dead. Of course, now I'm absolutely terrified myself, so I immediately called back. It goes to voicemail, so I called again. I called again and again with no answer. Finally, after about 4 minutes, she called me, although those 4 minutes felt like 40 years. Hey, what the hell is going on? I ask. She's absolutely hysterical and crying. I can't understand a word she says. Stop. Slow down for just a second, I say. She slows down enough to explain they're in the car and driving to her parents. She looked at the camera, and when she saw what was on it, she got up and grabbed our son and rushed downstairs and out the door. Didn't even close the garage. Don't worry about it, I said. I'll drive by when I get off and close it. We live in a generally safe neighborhood, so I'm not too concerned the door is up. You will not go in there, she says. Hell no, I returned. Why are we on the camera? She asked. Is it a recording? I don't know, I returned. I'm gonna keep watching it and see if there's anything I can tell. Do our code words with Buddy. We have code words because we're nerds. We've seen too many pod people and imposter movies, so we decided a long time ago to come up with some code words with each other to be able to tell if someone was impersonating us. We have a few code words, but we also have a 3-sentence story that we recite together, each saying a different part slightly different from each other. I hear her on the phone saying the things we taught our son. He giggles as he says them. He does every time we practice, since he thinks they're a joke and doesn't have any idea of the real meaning. We're both convinced he's our son. My wife then says our part, and I'm convinced she's her. We made up these words as a complete joke to ourselves. I never once in my life ever imagined we'd actually need them. Unreal. She got to her parents safely, and it was hard to hang up. I told her we'll figure it out in the morning, hopefully just a glitch. She said she didn't think it was a glitch. When she was running out, she had to run to our son's room and the door was open. There's a little flashing light on the back of the camera that indicates it's connected to the internet. It gave off just enough light that when she ran by, she thought she saw, out of the corner of her eye, a shadowy outline of what could have been an adult sitting on our son's bed. It sent chills down my spine just thinking about it. Knowing that they were safe and out of the house was the only thing that kept me at work that night. It was a long 4 hours, but I kept checking the camera every chance I got. Sure enough, they were still sitting on the bed, staring up at the camera with emotionless gazes. I studied them to see if I could see any pattern, from their breathing to their blinking. Their breathing was steady and looked normal. It was their blinking that would tell me if this was just some kind of bizarre, time-looped freak accident video or not. I intently stared at my phone and counted the seconds between each blink, telling myself if this is a loop, then their blinks should be even and occur at the same time each time. There was no pattern to their blinking. It was erratic and random, just as a person blinking should be. The passing hours are what finally sealed the deal that this was not a weird looped video of some kind. My son's window was visible on camera, and I could see on camera that it was getting lighter outside his room. His curtains kept out just enough light to prevent the camera from exiting night vision, but let in just enough to be able to tell the sun is rising. I try to figure out what the hell I'm going to do before I leave work. Calling the police came to mind, but I talked myself out of it. First of all, what am I supposed to say? Someone is in my house that looks like my wife but isn't? Worse yet, what if they are entities of some kind and the police do go over and it murders them or something? I decided to tell my coworker about it. He was a firm believer in the paranormal and might have a suggestion. I show him the video and tell him the story. His initial response of, "That's creepy as hell," didn't help much, but he says he wants to go over and check it out. He says we both should see, if not my wife will try and act like my wife. I tell him absolutely not, and he says we should at least go to the house even if we don't go in. I agreed on that since I wanted to close the garage. We got to my house and walked around the perimeter first. Not sure what we wanted to accomplish by that, but it felt like something we should do. The curtains were all drawn since nobody was there to open them in the morning, so we couldn't see anything. I went to close the garage and suddenly had this overwhelming urge to go inside and investigate. It was like I just had to know what was going on. So we went. We walked through the kitchen towards the foyer where the stairs are. It was eerily quiet in our house at the time. We stopped at the bottom of the stairs and waited a few seconds. I looked at the camera again and they were still sitting there. I've never been so scared in my life. My coworker puts his foot on the first step and I suddenly say, "Stop," loudly. "Forget this, we're out of here," I tell him. "Come on." I start making my way back to the kitchen. We hear a loud creak in the floor from upstairs. It's my son's room. He has a very loud, creaky board right in the middle of his floor that's almost impossible not to step on. My wife is still deciding if we ever want to fix it because it will alert us if he's ever up to no good when he gets older trying to sneak out or something. Come on, come on, come on! I yell as I motion for him to move his butt. We're out of the house in about 2 seconds. Out on the street, I check my phone. Now only not my son was sitting on the bed, same blank stare. Not my wife was gone. Holy guacamole, my coworker says. That was stupid as hell for us. Do not tell my wife we went inside. She would be furious if she found out what we just did. I use my garage door opener in my car to close the door. Before we leave, I look at the camera again. Not my wife is back on the bed with not my son, both staring blankly up at the camera, blinking every few seconds. That was all about 4 days ago now. Not my wife and not my son are still sitting on the bed staring up at the camera. They haven't moved a millimeter. We obviously haven't gone back to our house. I need your help. What do we do? Someone has been secretly living in my basement. I'd always been an avid explorer. Being able to uncover history, as inconsequential as it may be, was the best feeling in the world. I had spent plenty of time exploring abandoned parks and buildings around my city. My house was on the outskirts of town, bordering a massive forest. I went for hikes every once in a while to clear my head. Usually I would choose a different path each time. That was until I found a small wooden cabin that had clearly been abandoned. The door was missing. The wood was rotting. It was overgrown. The first time I stumbled upon it, I was unprepared. Usually I carried a knife and some pepper spray with me when I explored these places, just for my own protection. You never know who might be hiding in there. I didn't have any of it with me that day though, since I hadn't planned on anything more than a short walk. Besides, I hate to admit it, but something about that cabin shook me. As soon as I laid eyes on it, my heart beat faster than it ever had before. My whole body was jittery, so I left. I went back home and tried to forget about it, but I didn't forget about it. The next few days I couldn't focus on my work. I couldn't do anything. My mind was consumed with the thoughts of what could possibly be in there. Soon the thoughts took over my sleep. At first I dreamt about the cabin, but would later wake up in a cold sweat before I could step inside. Then the thoughts progressed to the point where I was unable to sleep at all. Exactly a week after first discovering the cabin, I decided it was the day. I was going to finally see for myself what was hiding in there. With the knife and pepper spray safely tucked away in my belt, I set off on my journey, retracing my steps from 7 days before. My pulse rose higher and higher as I got close to the cabin. When I finally saw it again, it appeared exactly as it had on my previous visit. I walked in through the empty doorway. The floorboards made loud creaks with every step. The first room was completely empty. An orange glow shone through a door on my right that was hanging on by one hinge. My palms covered in sweat, I pushed the door aside. The source of the glow was a set of 5 identical candles sitting upright on the floor. It's a miracle this place hasn't burnt down, I thought to myself. One by one, I picked up the candles and blew them out. As I was about to put out the last one, something red on the wall caught my eye. I raised the candle near the wall, using the light to inspect further. Written on the wall over and over again was a name. Peter Sherrill, my name. The candle slipped through my fingers and fell onto the floor, but I didn't need it anymore. Even without the light, I could now clearly see my own name written in blood on every inch of this room's walls. I instinctively stomped out the fire on the floor, still processing what I had just seen. My whole body shook as though there was an earthquake. My knees gave out and I fell harder than I'd ever fallen before. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, repeating forever in my head. Tears fell from my eyes as I struggled to comprehend the meaning of this cabin. When I finally regained the strength to stand, I tried to walk out of the cabin to leave it behind, to pretend this never happened. But something in my own head told me that no, I had to stay. There was more to this place than just the writing. There was something else that I needed to see. Maybe it was my own instinct. Maybe it was some mysterious force that science can't explain. Whatever it was convincing enough that I turned around and went further into the house. At the back of the cabin, there was a staircase heading down. I didn't know where it led, but again, something in my own head told me to continue, so I did. Further and further down. The staircase was now made entirely of stone and lit by torches on the walls. When I arrived at the bottom, I was met with laughter. A man stood ahead of me with his back turned. He had long hair that clearly hadn't been cared for in years. He was thin and decrepit. I stood frozen in place, despite every natural instinct in my mind telling me to run. The man turned around. What I saw standing directly in front of me was my own face, my own body, me. The only difference was that he was clearly older by a few years. But his eyes, his nose, everything. He was absolutely, unmistakably me. I stood in place, jaw dropped, for what seemed to be an eternity. How is this possible? The sound of my heartbeat echoed through my entire body, drowning out everything else. The ground felt uneven. The basement began to spin around me. My vision started to fade. It was only when I noticed the knife in his hand that my mind snapped out of its broken state, and my body allowed me to move. I had to act fast, so what were my options? I could have stayed put, but this person, or this thing that was imitating me, showed no signs of being peaceful. I could have ran, but what if he caught up to me? With my mind clouded by panic, I could only think of one other viable choice. I quickly unclipped the pepper spray from my belt and squirted it directly into his eyes. Well, technically into my eyes. I had half expected it to hurt myself as well, but it didn't. The older version of me covered his face and stumbled backwards. I had an opportunity and I pounced, drawing my knife and piercing his chest. He almost immediately fell to the ground, limp. After taking his knife as well as my own, I ran back up the stairs, horrified by what I had just done. After contemplating my options, I decided I couldn't risk leaving the cabin. I had just committed a murder. Even if there was no reasonable explanation for the existence of the person I had murdered, I had to stay in hiding. A knot tightened in my stomach as I realized I would have to take care of the body, just to be safe. The cabin was secluded, but it was still too conspicuous if someone did find it. When night fell, I dragged the body all the way out of the cabin and into the woods, trying not to throw up. Deeper and deeper into the woods I went, ensuring nobody would ever find it. I walked with the corpse of my older self for a couple of hours. As it turned out, there was one more surprise in store for me that night. I stopped in my tracks when I realized I was walking toward a seemingly endless series of deep holes in the ground. A shovel lay in front of my feet. I let go of the body as I went to investigate. I peered over the edge of one of the holes, my breath hastening as my new greatest fear showed up in front of my eyes. Another version of myself was lying dead, in the hole. It was a gravesite. Running from one grave to another, it was repeatedly confirmed that this was a gravesite entirely populated by dead versions of myself. My body, my thoughts, my feelings, all went numb. I stopped thinking. I did the only thing I could do. I picked up the shovel and dug another grave. Immediately after tossing the body in, I began my multiple-hour walk back to the cabin, back to my new home. That brings me to the present. I'm sitting in the middle of the cabin, typing this out on my phone that's about to die, as a final cry for help. In the days following my discovery of the cabin's secret, my mental state went from numb to horrified. I fear I may be stuck here until a younger me comes to take my place. Even worse, I fear that new versions of me are continuously cursed to fulfill this disgusting prophecy for all of eternity. Just yesterday, I returned to the room that had my name covering its walls, only to find one more piece of writing hidden amongst the names. The cabin must always have a resident.